Hello there. Well, I'm at Borough Waters Day Ticket Lake in Essex today, and first cast on the floaters. I've got a nice fish on. We'll get this one in and have a look at it, and then I'll show you some of the tactics I use for my surface fishing. Yes, yes, that's first blood for this morning. First cast. Well, the hook actually fell out in the net, which was handy. Have a quick look at her. Oh, still nice and feisty even after that battle. Come on. Calm down. Nice double. Pretty fish. Call that one single scow. Look at that. Well, it's first cast on the surface this morning. Been here about an hour or so, just feeding it up first. So I don't normally bother actually fishing until I've really got the fish going. I mean, that's one of the secrets of surface fishing. Well, she wants to go back, I think, this one. So we'll release her straight away. See if we can catch a big one. Well, it's been typical floater fishing today. In a word, frustrating. Had a couple, missed loads, and now I've got another one on. Finally, it's taken a while, but that's the joy of floater fishing, really. You know, there's much easier ways to do it. You can fish with an over-depth zig, and oh, no, come on. What was I saying about floater fishing? Well, just playing that one. I should have been messing around talking to the camera, really, but there you go, it's fallen off, but such is life. But yeah, so there's lots of ways you can do it. You can fish with beach caster rigs, over depth zigs, which is, you know, you just chuck them out and wait for it to rip off, really. But I much prefer just a free line, and that a lot of people think that just limits you to fishing close in, but it doesn't. So I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Calm down, and we'll have a look at how I rig up for me for me free line, and then how I get some distance. So come on, we're going to have a look at that. Oh, I don't know, floater fishing. Oh, talk about stressful. Right, I'm going to have a sit down for a bit, and I'll show you what I've been using. As I say, all I tend to do, if I can get away with it, is just free line, and that can be as simple as just a hook on the end of the line. I tend to use a hair rig because some of the baits that I use. Small hook, size 12 or 14. Generally, the smaller the hook you use, the more bites you're going to get. And in open water like we got here, you shouldn't have a problem landing fish. I mean, I've landed fish to nearly 35 pound on size 14s, believe it or not. It's all about just having balanced tackle. Small hook, 8 pound nylon. Clear nylon, that's definitely, when I've looked at it from underwater, definitely the most difficult to see. You can still see it, especially if it's sitting on the surface, because it bends the surface film, but it's certainly a lot less visible than any coloured line. Then I'm using 10 pound main line straight through, 2¼ pound rod. This is one of the Nash scopes, which is 10 footer, perfect for this sort of fishing, and just a small fixed ball reel, and that's it. Hook bait wise, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, so a lot of the time, on some waters you can get away with it, sometimes you can't, but this little marshmallows are perfect. They're just about the right kind of buoyancy, similar to sort of a floating pellet or a mixer. But the beauty of them is a really easy to hair rig, and very, very visible as well. So, you know, they're a soft texture, you just hair rig them so easy. There you go, and it doesn't matter how far out I'm fishing, I can see that hook bait, and I don't wait for the line to tighten up. I'm not using the float, so I can't watch the float. I'm not getting a bolt effect. I'm keeping my eye on that hook bait. So obviously I'm using a bait that weighs virtually nothing. I'm freelining it, so how am I going to get any distance? So a real simple little tip. It's one of them things where you think, why didn't I think of it earlier, really? I'm just going to use some PVA mesh, and I'm going to fill it with Nash riser pellet, which is a floating pellet, and you could use any kind of floating bait in there. I like pellet because they're fairly hard and dense, so they're going to give you a bit more distance and they're going to compact really well. So just going to make a little PVA stick. Try and keep it nice and tight. There we go, PVA stick full of floating pellets. So not only is that going to give me some casting weight, it's also going to put some extra bait right around the hook bait, and then all I do is just very carefully nick it on. Try not to get any pellet over the hook point, and there you go. And that will give me enough casting weight. Obviously the further I need a fish, I can use a bigger one, but I can cast 50 yards with that, no problem at all if necessary. And yeah, sometimes it's better to free line. If the wind conditions are right, I'll always free line. I've seen it so many times that carp, they might not actively spook off a controller, but a lot of the time what will happen is it can just put them down a bit. It makes them a bit more aware that there's tackle out there and they're being fished for. So if you can free line, I always will. But as I say, sometimes you need a controller, so we'll look at the different types of controller that I use next. So controller floats, say most of the time, if I can get away with it, I prefer the free line, but there's times when you can't get away with that. Now that's normally if you need to fish at really long range, which is pretty rare to be fair, but more common is when you've got a crosswind and the wind's whipping across the lake and you can't get on the back or the front of it. If you've got the wind coming straight at you or straight over your shoulder, it's perfect for floater fishing really, because it's going to keep all of your bait going in the same direction and your line will be straight. Now if you've got a wind coming across you either direction, what it's going to do is create a bow in the line, and that's going to be difficult to tighten up to if you haven't got a controller float on. So if I'm faced with that kind of conditions, then I'll use one of these flat controllers. The reason being is that they'll lie flat on the surface rather than a conventional controller, which is sort of sits more like in the vertical. And again, watching carp over the years from above the surface and below the surface, they definitely react less to something that's lying flat on the surface. I mean, years ago we just used to use a piece of wood or even a branch off a tree and cut it down and drill it and use it in very similar manner, sort of in line. But obviously these days we don't need to do that because we can just go into a shop and buy them. So yeah, flat controller, you can see it at long range, and it just gives you something to tighten up to and gives you a bit more control over the line if you've got a crosswind. Obviously these are bolt machines and fished with a short hook length, and generally I'll use probably 4 to 8 feet. You will get a nice bolt effect as well, so you don't have to be quite as on the ball and trying to watch the hook bait. But generally I like to watch the hook bait still, and as I say, strike when I see a fish go, because you can miss fish, especially if they've been pressured on the surface, where they'll pick the hook bait up, maybe sink very slowly below the surface, feel the line or the hook and spit it out. So I would have struck that fish and not waited for it to bolt off. If you're not using really bright coloured hook baits, then there's another tip that I can show you, which again makes it much easier to see dark hook baits and pick them out amongst the sort of floating pellets or whatever you're using as freebies. So we'll look at that next. So bright coloured hook baits are great because I can see them even at 30 or 40 yards range, no problem, but on some waters and on some days the fish won't react to that very well, and I can spook off of them. So sometimes it's better to use either a specialist dark hook bait or just a normal floating pellet like you would do for your loose feed. Now the trouble with that is that even though you can hair rig them nice and easily, how do you pick it out on the surface? You know, if I'm free lining, I've got nothing really to make that stand out. But fortunately there's a very simple little thing that you can do to make that a lot more visible. Now that's going to sit like that with the weight of the hook pulling it down underneath the bait. So all I do is get a little bit of the Nash spot on, which is obviously designed for marking your line in a nice bright colour, and I'll just paint the hair stop with a little bit of that and then give it 5 minutes to dry before I cast it out, and then all of a sudden you've got a hook bait that really stands out. But from a carp's eye view underneath, you can't really tell the difference. So again, makes your bait stand out, much more easy to pick out, and so you can strike at the bites rather than waiting for the fish to bolt. Give it a go. Proper scrap, that one. Nice fish. Well, it just goes to show, some days all you need is a hook. There we go. Another absolute stunner. What a cracking looking fish to finish the day with. Well, I hope today's exploits have inspired you to go and have a go off the surface. It really is brilliant fun right through the summer. I've never found a venue where you can't catch off the top, so get out there, give it a go and enjoy your fishing. Till next time, thanks very much for watching. See you soon.